The night I came home covered in rain and silence, I thought I was walking back into a prison I had built for myself. I didn't know I was about to see the first real miracle of my life. Rain slammed against the windshield of my black Escalade as Manhattan blurred past in streaks of gold and gray. 2 in the morning. Most of the city was asleep. Mine never slept. Not really. My phone buzzed again in the cup holder beside me. Another message from Luca about the shipment issue in Brooklyn. Another problem. Another fire to put out. I muted it without reading. For the first time in 15 years, I didn't have the strength for another conversation. My shoulders ached beneath my soaked wool coat. My jaw was tight from hours of holding back the kind of anger that poisoned everything it touched. People feared me because I stayed calm. Because I never raised my voice. But exhaustion was dangerous. Exhaustion cracked things open. The gates of the estate rolled apart as my SUV climbed the long driveway toward the mansion. Every window on the second floor was dark except one. The playroom. Strange. Usually the nannies left by 8. The night staff kept the lights low after the triplets fell asleep because loud sounds still triggered nightmares. Ever since their mother died, sleep inside that house had become war. Ethan screamed in his sleep almost every night. Noah stopped speaking for nearly 6 months. And Lily. Lily cried any time I left the room. My grip tightened on the steering wheel as the memory hit me again. Tiny hands clutching my suit jacket at the funeral. 3 children too young to understand why their mother wasn't coming home. I parked beneath the stone archway and stepped out into the cold rain. The mansion stood silent around me. Massive. Expensive. Empty. Like a museum pretending to be a home. I unlocked the front door quietly, expecting darkness and the distant sound of cartoons playing from somebody's iPad upstairs. Instead, I heard something else. Soft music. Barely audible. A woman's voice humming somewhere deeper in the house. I froze. Slowly, I followed the sound down the hallway toward the playroom. Warm light spilled across the marble floor. And then I saw her. Claire Bennett was asleep on the oversized sectional beneath the window, still wearing her pale blue Maid uniform, one shoe half fallen off her foot like she'd been too exhausted to finish taking it off. Lily was curled against her chest. Ethan slept with his head in her lap. Noah was stretched beside her beneath a blanket covered in cartoon astronauts. A children's book rested open against Claire's arm. One of her hands was tangled gently in Lily's hair. The other still held Noah's tiny fingers like she'd promised not to let go. I don't know how long I stood there. Maybe seconds. Maybe forever. Because nothing in that room made sense. My children were asleep. Not restless. Not afraid. Sleeping. Deeply. Peacefully. Like the world had finally stopped hurting them for a few hours. And Claire, she looked exhausted. There were faint shadows beneath her eyes. Her blonde hair had fallen loose from its clip. She couldn't have been older than 27. Too young to carry that kind of tiredness. The fire crackled softly nearby. Rain tapped against the tall windows. And for the first time since my wife died, the house felt warm again. Then Lily stirred in her sleep and whispered one tiny word against Claire's chest. Mama. My heart stopped. I should have walked away. That would have been the smart thing to do. Go upstairs. Sleep for 3 hours. Wake up and return to being the man everyone expected me to be. Cold. Controlled. Untouchable. But I could not move. I stood in the doorway of that playroom with rainwater still dripping from my coat, staring at the woman my children had somehow trusted with the pieces of themselves I could never reach. Lily shifted again against Claire's chest, her tiny fingers curling into the fabric of the Maid uniform like she was afraid someone might take her away. Claire stirred slightly but did not wake up. Instead, she pulled the blanket higher around all three children without even opening her eyes. Instinct. Gentle. Protective. Something in my chest tightened painfully. I had hired Claire Bennett 3 months earlier because the agency described her as patient and dependable. Nothing more. No dramatic resume. No elite childcare certifications. Just a quiet woman from Connecticut with experience caring for children with anxiety after family trauma. I barely remembered the interview. She had spoken softly. Kept her eyes lowered. Wore a beige sweater 2 sizes too big for her. The only thing I remembered clearly was Lily walking directly into her arms 5 minutes after meeting her. My daughter had not done that with anyone since the funeral. At the time, I convinced myself it meant nothing. Children were unpredictable. But standing there now, watching all 3 of them sleep around Claire like planets orbiting warmth, I realized something terrifying. They trusted her more than they trusted me. The thought landed harder than any threat I had faced in years. A floorboard creaked beneath my shoe. Claire's eyes opened instantly. Not slowly. Not groggy. Instantly alert like someone used to waking up prepared for bad news. Her pale blue eyes found mine across the room and all the color drained from her face. Mr. Moretti. Her voice came out rough with exhaustion. She carefully shifted beneath the children, trying not to wake them. I am sorry. I did not mean to fall asleep down here. I should have answered immediately. Instead, I kept looking at her. There was something fragile about the scene in front of me that made speaking feel dangerous. Claire glanced down nervously at Lily still wrapped around her arm. Noah had another nightmare, she whispered. Then Ethan woke up too. I thought if I stayed with them for a little while, her voice faded. Like she expected me to be angry. Most people did. You stayed all night? I finally asked. She nodded once. Lily kept asking if you were coming home. Guilt hit me sharp and unexpected. I loosened my tie slowly, suddenly unable to breathe properly inside the expensive fabric. You should have called one of the night staff. Claire gave me a tired little smile that almost broke something inside me. They did try. But sometimes children do not need another employee. Silence settled between us. Soft. Heavy. The fire cracked quietly beside the windows. Somewhere upstairs, the grandfather clock chimed 3 times. Claire carefully brushed Noah's hair away from his forehead. Such a small movement. But Noah leaned into her hand even in his sleep. Trust again. Everywhere I looked, trust. Something my world did not allow. Something my children still somehow wanted despite everything life had already taken from them. Claire looked back at me cautiously. I hope I did not overstep. I stared at her for a long moment before answering. No, I said quietly. You did something I could not. Her expression shifted slightly. Confused. Maybe even worried by the honesty in my voice. Then Lily opened her sleepy eyes halfway, saw me standing there, and smiled for the first time in weeks. Daddy came home, she whispered. And for the first time in years, that house did not feel empty when she said it. I did not sleep that night. I went upstairs eventually. Changed out of my wet clothes. Stood beneath a scalding shower for nearly 20 minutes while the image of Claire sleeping with my children replayed in my head over and over again. It unsettled me more than any meeting, any threat, any deal I had handled in the last decade. Because peace inside that mansion felt unnatural now. Like seeing snow in July. By 6 in the morning, I was downstairs in my office pretending to work. The security monitors glowed softly across one wall. Reports waited unopened on my desk. Coffee sat untouched beside my hand. My eyes kept drifting toward the camera feed from the kitchen. Claire moved quietly around the space wearing jeans and a cream-colored sweater instead of the maid uniform from the night before. Her blonde hair was tied loosely back. Ethan sat at the counter coloring dinosaurs while Noah pushed cereal around his bowl half asleep. Lily stood on a chair beside Claire helping her make pancakes with absolute seriousness. I watched Claire cut strawberries into tiny heart shapes because Lily refused to eat fruit any other way. Watched her kiss the top of Noah's head when he finally took a bite of breakfast without arguing. Watched Ethan laugh so hard milk came out of his nose when Claire accidentally flipped a pancake onto the floor. The sound stopped me cold. Laughter. Real laughter. Inside my house. I leaned back. Slowly in my chair, suddenly aware of how quiet my office had become. How quiet my life had become long before my wife died. There had always been money. Power. Men waiting outside doors for my instructions. But joy. I could not remember the last time I heard it without feeling suspicious of it. A knock sounded against my office door. Luca stepped inside carrying a tablet and his usual expression of controlled impatience. "The Chicago issue needs your approval," he said. Then his eyes shifted briefly toward the monitor wall. "The kid seemed different this morning." Different. The word barely covered it. "They slept through the night," I said quietly. Luca raised an eyebrow. "All three?" I nodded once. His expression changed slightly. Even he understood what that meant. There had been therapists. Sleep specialists. Expensive doctors with polished smiles promising progress. Nothing lasted. The nightmares always returned eventually. But last night my children slept like they felt safe. Luca followed my gaze toward the kitchen monitor again. "The nanny?" "Claire." Saying her name out loud felt strangely personal. "Her file checked out?" I asked. Luca looked mildly offended. "Of course. No criminal record. No financial issues. Small town upbringing. Former daycare assistant. Worked private childcare jobs in Connecticut and Boston. Quiet life. Quiet." I kept staring at the screen as Claire wiped flour off Lily's nose while my daughter giggled uncontrollably. "Sometimes quiet people survive loud things," I said before I could stop myself. Luca studied me carefully, then changed the subject, which was exactly why he had survived beside me for 12 years. "You are supposed to leave for Manhattan Tower in an hour. Cancel it." He blinked once. "You are canceling the meeting with the Russians?" "Reschedule." Luca looked genuinely shocked now. "For what reason?" My eyes stayed fixed on the kitchen monitor where Claire was now dancing badly to an old Frank Sinatra song while all three children laughed around her. Something unfamiliar settled heavily in my chest. Not peace exactly. But close enough to scare me. "Because," I said slowly, "my children are smiling." The strange thing about loneliness is that you stop noticing it after a while. It becomes part of the architecture. Like the marble floors. The empty hallways. The sound of your own footsteps echoing through rooms too large for one person to survive inside emotionally. But Claire changed the atmosphere of that mansion without even trying. 3 days after I canceled the Manhattan meeting, I found myself coming home earlier than usual. Not because my work disappeared. If anything, the city had become more demanding lately. More problems. More pressure. But every night around 6 o'clock, I caught myself checking the time like a man rushing towards something instead of away from it. That realization alone should have concerned me. I walked through the front doors just after sunset and immediately heard chaos coming from the backyard. Children screaming. Water splashing. Laughter. I stepped outside onto the stone patio and stopped cold. Claire was standing ankle-deep in the shallow end of the pool fully clothed, trying unsuccessfully to catch Noah while Ethan sprayed everyone nearby with a garden hose like a tiny maniac. Lily sat wrapped in a pink towel near the edge cheering them all on like a queen supervising loyal subjects. Claire looked up when she noticed me standing there. Her eyes widened slightly. "Oh no," she muttered under her breath. Ethan turned around immediately. "Daddy!" 3 seconds later all 3 children were running toward me at full speed. Tiny arms collided with my legs hard enough to nearly knock me backward. I caught Lily automatically before she slipped on the wet concrete. Noah grabbed my hand. Ethan started talking so fast I could barely understand him. Something about sharks. And pool races. And Claire almost falling in trying to save a toy submarine. I stood there frozen while all 3 children spoke over each other at once. Excited. Happy. Alive in a way I had not seen since before the funeral. Claire climbed carefully out of the pool looking horrified. Water dripped from her sweater onto the patio stones. "I am so sorry," she said quickly. I told them no running near the edge and then Noah slipped and then Ethan turned on the hose. And everything became, she looked down at herself helplessly. This. I should have been annoyed. The pool area looked like a hurricane passed through it. One of the expensive outdoor pillows floated sadly near the deep end. Noah was still soaking wet despite clearly being changed once already. But then Lily leaned sleepily against my shoulder and whispered, "Claire laughed today." My eyes shifted back toward her instantly. Claire froze under the weight of my stare. A strand of wet blonde hair clung to her cheek. There was a faint smear of sunscreen across one arm. And for the first time since I met her, she looked young instead of tired. Young and startled and painfully human, standing there dripping water onto imported Italian stone while my children smiled around her like flowers turning towards sunlight. Something dangerous moved quietly through my chest. Not desire. Worse. Attachment. Claire crossed her arms awkwardly. "I can have everything cleaned immediately." "Leave it," I said. She blinked. "What?" I loosened my tie slowly while Ethan continued explaining the detailed rules of whatever game they invented outside. "Leave it," I repeated quietly. "The mess can stay." Claire stared at me for a long second like she did not trust what she heard. Honestly, neither did I. Because the truth was simple and terrifying. That disaster behind her looked more like a family than anything my mansion had resembled in years. Then Noah tugged on my sleeve gently. "Daddy?" "What?" He pointed toward Claire. She jumped in the pool because I got scared. Silence hit me hard. Noah hated water after the accident that killed his mother. He had not entered the pool once in nearly 2 years. I looked back at Claire slowly. She lowered her eyes immediately like she did not want credit for it. But I noticed something then. Her hands were trembling slightly from the cold. And without thinking, I took off my suit jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. There are moments when instinct speaks before logic catches up. Tiny moments. Easy to miss if you are not paying attention. Mine happened the second Claire flinched when I touched her shoulder. It lasted less than a heartbeat. Most people would not have noticed it. But I noticed everything. The children ran ahead toward the kitchen still laughing while Claire stood frozen beneath my suit jacket like she regretted accepting it. Her fingers gripped the fabric too tightly. Her eyes stayed lowered. "You are cold," I said quietly. "I am fine." She answered too quickly. Another instinct. Another lie. I studied her for a moment before turning toward the house. "Get the kids inside before they catch pneumonia." Claire blinked once at the sudden shift in tone. Then she nodded and hurried after the triplets, calling Noah's name softly when he nearly slipped again near the patio steps. I watched them disappear through the glass doors while something unsettled twisted slowly in my chest. Fear recognizes fear. And Claire Bennett carried hers like a shadow she hoped nobody would see. Dinner that night felt strangely normal. Ethan argued passionately about whether sharks could survive in freshwater. Lily fell asleep halfway through dessert with frosting on her cheek. Noah stayed close to Claire the entire evening, occasionally resting his head against her arm while she read quietly from a picture book beside him. I barely touched my food. Mostly I watched. Observed the details nobody else would care about. The way Claire cut the children's food into smaller pieces automatically without being asked. The way she checked the locks on the back doors twice before bedtime. The way loud male voices from the television made her shoulders tense for just a second before she relaxed again. Tiny fractures. Tiny clues. Around 10 o'clock, the house finally quieted. I stood alone in my office nursing a glass of bourbon when movement on the security monitor caught my attention. Claire. She stepped carefully through the front garden wearing an oversized gray hoodie over sweatpants, probably thinking everyone else was asleep. She sat on the stone bench near the fountain and pulled out her phone. Even through the grainy camera feed, I could tell something was wrong immediately. Her posture changed. Tight. Defensive. She held the phone away from her ear slightly like the voice on the other end physically hurt to listen to. Then I saw it. Tears. Claire wiped at them quickly with the sleeve of her hoodie, glancing toward the house like she was afraid someone might see. My grip tightened around the glass. She spoke quietly into the phone for nearly 3 minutes. Then suddenly she stood up. Fast. Agitated now. Please stop calling me, she said. Her voice barely carried through the office speaker system, but I heard enough. Silence. Then Claire's face went white. Completely white. She whispered something I could not hear. Another pause. And then she wrapped her arms around herself like she was trying not to fall apart right there beside the fountain. A dangerous calm settled over me instantly. The kind that usually ended badly for someone. I reached for the intercom connected to the front gate security. Who contacted Miss Bennett today? The guard downstairs answered immediately. No visitors, sir. Phone records. Silence for 2 seconds. Understood. I disconnected and looked back at the monitor. Claire sat down slowly on the bench again, breathing hard like she was fighting a panic attack alone in the dark. Rain began falling lightly around her. Soft at first. Then heavier. But she did not move. She just sat there trembling beneath my suit jacket while water soaked through her hood. Something about the image hit me harder than it should have. Because suddenly all I could think was one terrifying possibility. Claire Bennett was not afraid of my world. She was afraid of something she escaped before she ever entered it. By morning, Claire acted like nothing had happened. That disturbed me almost as much as the tears. Some people fall apart loudly. Others become quieter. More careful. Claire moved through breakfast with the same soft smile she always gave the children, but now I noticed the exhaustion beneath it more clearly. The slight redness around her eyes. The way her hands shook faintly when she poured coffee. The way she glanced toward the front windows every few minutes without realizing she was doing it. Fear changes the rhythm of a person. I knew that better than anyone. Daddy, look. Ethan held up a drawing from across the table. 3 stick figures stood beside what was apparently a dinosaur with wings. That is us escaping a volcano. Naturally, I said dryly. Ethan grinned proudly. Claire laughed softly under her breath while helping Lily spread jam onto toast. The sound pulled my attention toward her instantly again. Everything pulled my attention toward her lately. That was becoming a problem. Around noon, I found her alone in the laundry room folding tiny socks with almost surgical precision. The mansion was quiet for once. The triplets were upstairs during tutoring lessons. Sunlight spilled through the high windows across the folded towels beside her. Claire looked peaceful until she noticed me standing in the doorway. Then immediately guarded again. Mr. Moretti. Damien, I corrected automatically. She blinked in surprise. Right. Damien. Hearing my name in her voice did something strange to my heartbeat. I ignored it. Who called you last night? The towel in her hand stopped moving. Silence stretched between us. Claire lowered her eyes slowly. Nobody important. A lie again. I stepped further into the room. You were crying. Her fingers tightened around the fabric. I am sorry if I worried anyone. That was not my question. Claire swallowed hard. I watched the exact second panic flickered across her face before she buried it again. Too practiced. Too familiar. It was my ex-boyfriend, she admitted quietly. The words landed cold in my chest. Does he hurt you? She looked up fast. No, another lie. This one sharper. More desperate. I held her gaze steadily until she looked away first. Claire. My voice softened despite myself. Look at me. Slowly, she did. Her blue eyes looked exhausted now. Vulnerable in a way she clearly hated. You flinch when people move too fast around you, I said quietly. You check locks constantly. Loud voices make you nervous. And last night, whoever called you terrified you enough to sit in the rain alone at midnight. Her breathing changed slightly. People do not become afraid like that for no reason. For a moment, I thought she might deny everything again. But then her shoulders dropped just slightly. Like carrying the truth had finally become too heavy. His name is Daniel. She whispered. We dated for almost 4 years. Her voice sounded distant now. Fragile. At first he was charming. Funny. Everybody loved him. That sentence alone told me everything I needed to know. Claire stared down at the tiny socks in her hands. Then slowly, everything became about control. Who I talked to. Where I worked. What I wore. Her fingers trembled harder now. Leaving him was not simple. Rage moved quietly through me. Calm. Controlled. The dangerous kind. Does he know where you are? Claire hesitated. Too long. My jaw tightened instantly. Claire. Tears filled her eyes before she answered. I think he followed me here. Silence swallowed the room whole. Somewhere upstairs, one of the children laughed faintly during lessons. Bright. Innocent. Safe. Meanwhile Claire stood in front of me looking like someone waiting for punishment simply because she told the truth. And in that exact moment, something inside me shifted permanently. Because fear I understood. Pain I understood. But the idea of somebody making this woman afraid inside my home awakened something far colder than anger. The first thing I did was double the security around the estate. The second thing I did was make sure Claire never noticed. Fear grows when people feel watched. I knew that from experience. So instead of guards following her openly, I positioned extra men along the outer perimeter. Unmarked vehicles near the gates. Quiet surveillance around the property line. Invisible protection. Claire already carried enough tension in her shoulders without realizing an army had formed around her overnight. 2 days passed quietly after our conversation in the laundry room. Too quietly. That bothered me. Men like Daniel rarely disappeared when they lost control over someone. They escalated. Luca found almost nothing useful digging into Claire's past except a pattern that made my blood run cold. Multiple apartment changes in 3 years. Jobs abandoned suddenly. 2 police reports never formally filed. Hospital records from Boston listing accidental injuries. Accidental. I stared at the screen in my office until rage settled like ice beneath my ribs. Claire had survived by minimizing her own suffering so long she barely recognized it anymore. On Friday evening, the Triplets convinced her to help build a blanket fort in the upstairs family room. I heard them long before I saw them. Ethan shouting battle instructions. Lily demanding more pillows. Noah laughing quietly whenever Claire pretended to lose dramatically. I followed the noise upstairs without thinking. The sight that greeted me stopped me cold again. The entire room looked destroyed. Couch cushions everywhere. Blankets hanging from dining chairs. Flashlights glowing beneath a giant homemade fort that probably violated several fire safety laws. Claire sat cross-legged inside the disaster wearing one of Lily's plastic tiaras while reading a pirate story with exaggerated dramatic voices. My children looked happier than I had seen them in years. "Daddy!" Lily spotted me first and immediately waved excitedly from inside the blanket fortress. "Claire says pirates need cookies during emergencies." Claire looked up mortified beneath the ridiculous pink tiara. "In my defense," she said carefully, "they were very convincing pirates." I should not have smiled. I felt it happen anyway. Small. Brief. But real enough that Claire stared at me like she had witnessed something impossible. Ethan gasped dramatically. Daddy smiled. Noah blinked in shock. I saw it too. Lily pointed accusingly. Do it again. I shook my head slowly while all three children burst into laughter. Claire looked down quickly afterward, but not before I caught the softness in her expression. Warm. Unguarded for once. Dangerous again. Everything about this woman was becoming dangerous to me. Then the doorbell rang downstairs. Sharp. Unexpected. Claire froze instantly. The color disappeared from her face so fast it physically unsettled me. Ethan noticed too. Claire. She stood up too quickly inside the fort, bumping her head against a hanging blanket. Her breathing changed immediately. Fast. Panicked. Stay here, I said quietly. But Claire was already backing away toward the hallway like her body knew something terrible before the rest of us did. Another ring echoed through the mansion. Longer this time. My expression hardened instantly. I moved downstairs while one of the security monitors near the staircase flickered on automatically beside me. The front gate camera feed appeared across the screen. A man stood outside the entrance speaking aggressively with one of my guards. Mid-30s. Dark jacket. Baseball cap. Angry posture. I did not need Claire to identify him. Something cold settled through me immediately. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Claire stopped halfway down the staircase the second she saw the screen. Her hand gripped the railing so tightly her knuckles turned white. That is him, she whispered. Terror filled her voice so completely it transformed the entire atmosphere of the house in seconds. Upstairs, the children still laughed inside their blanket fort completely unaware. Innocent. Safe. Meanwhile Claire looked like someone standing at the edge of a nightmare she thought she escaped. My jaw tightened slowly as I stared at the man outside my gates. Then I looked back at Claire trembling on the staircase. And for the first time in a very long time, I stopped feeling like the most dangerous person in the room. Claire looked like she could barely breathe. I crossed the foyer slowly and stopped directly beneath the security monitor while the man outside continued arguing with the guard at the gate. Even through the grainy camera feed, arrogance radiated from him. The kind built from years of believing fear gave him ownership over another person. How did he find you? I asked quietly without looking away from the screen. Claire's voice shook behind me. I do not know. Another lie. Not malicious. Protective. She still thought protecting other people from her problems was her responsibility. Claire. I finally turned toward her. Tell me the truth. She wrapped her arms tightly around herself beneath the soft yellow chandelier light. Fragile. Cornered. I called my sister yesterday, she admitted. I used a number he probably still had access to. Her eyes filled immediately with guilt. I did not think he would, her voice broke apart before she finished. Upstairs, Ethan suddenly shouted something about pirate treasure while Lily laughed loudly. Afterward, the normal sound of children inside that house felt almost surreal against the fear standing in front of me. Claire heard it too. Her expression changed instantly. Panic sharpened. The kids. She looked toward the staircase. I do not want them scared. That sentence did something irreversible to me. Even terrified, her first instinct was still protecting my children. I stepped closer carefully, slow enough not to startle her. Look at me. Claire's eyes lifted reluctantly. Nobody is coming near those children. My voice stayed calm. Controlled. And nobody is taking you anywhere. She stared at me for a long second like she did not know what to do with kindness that came without conditions attached to it. The intercom near the front doors buzzed softly. Sir, one of the guards asked. The man is demanding to speak with Miss Bennet directly. Claire physically flinched at the word demanding. That was all I needed. No, I answered coldly. Send him away. He says he will wait outside the property all night if necessary. I glanced back toward the monitor. Daniel paced aggressively near the gates now, running one hand through his hair while speaking rapidly at the guards. Impatient. Agitated. Used to forcing reactions from people. Claire whispered quietly behind me. If he gets angry enough, he does not stop. Silence settled heavily between us. I looked at her slowly. Really looked. At the exhaustion carved into her expression. The fear she carried like second skin. The way she kept bracing herself for the world to turn cruel again. Then I understood something with terrifying clarity. Claire Bennet had spent years surviving men who confused control with love. My jaw tightened. Luca, I said into the intercom. Bring the car around. Claire's eyes widened instantly. What are you doing? Ending this conversation properly. No, panic flooded her voice now. She stepped closer fast enough to surprise me. Please do not go out there. Her fingers caught my sleeve before she realized what she was doing. The contact froze both of us for a second. Claire pulled her hand back immediately like she crossed a line. But I barely noticed. Because her hand was ice cold. He likes provoking people, she whispered. And you do not know him. I held her gaze steadily. Claire. My voice lowered. Softer now. You are standing inside a mansion protected by 40 cameras, 12 armed guards, and a man the entire city avoids disappointing. Her breathing caught slightly. Trust me when I tell you this. I stepped closer until only inches separated us beneath the chandelier light. Your ex-boyfriend is not the most dangerous person outside tonight. Claire stared at me speechless. Upstairs, Noah suddenly appeared at the top of the staircase clutching a blanket around his shoulders sleepily. His little eyes moved between us nervously. Claire, he whispered. Instantly her attention shifted away from fear and back toward him. She hurried upstairs without hesitation, kneeling beside him gently while he wrapped his tiny arms around her neck. I watched the entire thing in silence. The softness in her voice. The way Noah melted against her like safety had finally become a person instead of a place. Then Claire looked back at me over Noah's shoulder. Fear still lived in her eyes. But now something else existed there too. Hope. And God help the man outside those gates if he thought I would let him destroy that. I expected screaming. Threats. Some dramatic confrontation outside the gates that would confirm every terrible assumption Claire carried about men with power. Instead, when I stepped out into the cold night air, I found Daniel pacing beside the security barrier looking exhausted more than dangerous. Rain clung to the shoulders of his dark jacket. His jaw tightened the second he saw me approach. Who are you supposed to be? He snapped immediately. The rich guy she works for. I stopped several feet away beneath the stone archway while Luca remained silent behind me. Calm settled through my body like ice water. You are trespassing. Daniel laughed bitterly. I just want to talk to her. No, I said simply. His expression darkened. She belongs with me. The sentence hit something violent inside my chest. Not because it scared me. Because it sounded too familiar. Ownership disguised as love. Control disguised as devotion. I studied him quietly for a long moment. Mid-30s. Bloodshot eyes. Restless posture. The kind of man who confused being needed with being obeyed. Claire does not belong to anyone, I said coldly. Daniel stepped closer to the gate. You do not understand what we have been through. I understand enough. My voice stayed dangerously calm. I understand she is afraid of you. Silence. For the first time since I walked outside, uncertainty crossed his face. Small. Brief. But there. She told you that? He asked quietly. She did not need to. Rain tapped softly against the iron gates between us. Somewhere behind me, warm light still glowed through the mansion windows. Home. Safety. Things Claire still looked surprised to find. Daniel looked down at the pavement for several seconds before speaking again. I messed up sometimes, he muttered. But I loved her. I stared at him steadily. Love should not make someone tremble when the phone rings. His face tightened like the truth physically hurt to hear out loud. The silence afterward stretched long and heavy. Finally, Daniel exhaled shakily and rubbed one hand across his face. I just wanted to know if she was okay. I thought about lying. Thought about telling him nothing. But Claire spent too many years surviving fear already. She deserved peace, not another war fought around her. She is safe here, I answered. And she is not coming with you. Daniel looked toward the mansion one last time. His expression cracked slightly then. Regret maybe. Loss. People destroy things long before they realize they loved them. Tell her, he stopped himself. Swallowed hard. No. Never mind. Then slowly, he stepped back from the gates. No shouting. No threats. Just quiet defeat hanging around him like rainwater. Luca watched carefully as Daniel disappeared into the darkness beyond the estate entrance. That was easier than expected, he muttered once the man was gone. I kept staring toward the empty road. No, I said quietly. That was someone finally understanding he lost something good. When I returned inside, the mansion had gone quiet again. The children were asleep upstairs. Soft piano music drifted faintly from somewhere deeper in the house. I followed the sound toward the library and stopped in the doorway. Claire sat curled into the oversized armchair near the fireplace wearing one of my sweaters over her pajamas. A book rested forgotten in her lap. She looked up immediately when she saw me enter. Nervous. Hopeful. Is he gone? I nodded once. Relief hit her so hard her eyes filled instantly. She covered her mouth like she hated crying in front of anyone. I crossed the room slowly and crouched beside her chair before she could apologize for it. Hey. My voice softened automatically. You do not have to be afraid anymore. Claire looked at me for a long moment like she wanted to believe me but did not know how yet. Then suddenly she leaned forward and wrapped her arms around me. Small. Careful. Trembling slightly. The kind of hug given by someone who spent years surviving instead of resting. My arms closed around her instinctively. The fire crackled softly nearby. Rain tapped against the tall windows. And upstairs, 3 children slept peacefully beneath the same roof for the first time in years. Claire pulled back slowly afterward, embarrassed by her own vulnerability. But I only brushed one tear gently away from her cheek with my thumb. You brought life back into this house, I whispered quietly. Her breath caught. And I think, I admitted softly, you brought it back into me too.